What is going on, everybody, and welcome to my review of the long-awaited Eli Roth film, Thanksgiving. Oh wait, excuse me, I said that wrong. Thanksgiving. So for those that don't know the genesis of this movie, back in 2007, Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino paired up to make the film Grindhouse, which was Planet Terror, Robert Rodriguez's film, and Tarantino's film Death Proof, that they played as a double feature. And in the intermission, I believe, in between those two movies, they played a bunch of fake trailers. We had one, Machete, which actually became two different movies, Machete Kills. You had Rob Zombie doing Werewolf Woman of the SS, and then Eli Roth, one of his was Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving was probably the one that most people were talking about because not only did it capture like the 80s, 70s exploitation vibe of it so much with the look of the trailer, but it was so off kilter and it was so brutal just in that little tiny teaser that all horror fans everywhere really wanted to see that as a full-length film. And for years, we've been hearing whispers and rumors that Eli Roth was finally going to be putting this into production and we are finally going to be getting this. And this year, in 2023, Jesus Christ, 16 years after Grindhouse, we finally have Thanksgiving. Now, while I would say I like most of Eli Roth's films, there's none of them that I really love. All of them tend to have pretty significant issues. Most of the time, it's the writing and the characters. But I was somebody that loved that original teaser, and I've really been curious to see what he would do if he brought this to a full-length version. And I'll be honest, Thanksgiving is one of those holidays that I could use a few more horror films to throw into my catalog. Christmas has plenty. Thanksgiving has Thanksgiving. So when I walked into this, I just wanted to have a good time. I just wanted to have some dumb fun, if anything. I wanted to have some nice, gory, creative kills, hopefully have some characters that I can be entertained by, and I really hoped that he was going to harness the whole Thanksgiving holiday and a lot of the tropes and the visuals of that holiday in the slasher film. That's what I wanted. But really quick before I tell you whether I got what I wanted, if you are preparing like all of us are for the Thanksgiving holiday and you are losing sight of how to eat healthy along the way, be sure to check out the sponsor of today's video, Factor. Well, the holidays are here. It's time for family and festivities and a whole bunch of cooking. If you're like me and work a full-time job while also being completely in charge of the cooking of the household, these couple of weeks leading up to Thanksgiving are absolutely stress-filled, and the first casualty is remembering to eat healthy along the way. You're too busy to cook, you're too sick of looking at food to meal prep, and if you have to go to the grocery store one more time, luckily this is where Factor meals have come into play and helped me tremendously by shipping fresh, never frozen meals right to your door that are ready in just 2 minutes. So all you have to do is heat, enjoy, and then get back to all of that holiday prep. With over 34 chef-prepared and dietitian-approved meals, there's a variety of weekly options that will never allow you to fall victim to food fatigue. Plus, you can round out your meal and replenish your snack supply with over 45 different add-ons, such as apple cinnamon pancakes or fruit smoothies. There's even calorie-smart meals with around or less than 550 calories. So if you're looking to take the hassle out of healthy eating, head to Factor75.com or click the link below and use code Cody Leach 50 to get 50% off of your first Factor box. That's 50% off by using the code Cody Leach 50 at the link in the video description or going to Factor75.com. And thank you so much to Factor for partnering with me on today's sponsorship. So starting off with the positives for Thanksgiving, it's the carnage candy, it's the kills, it's the gore, which is probably the safest assumption that you could make walking into this movie, is that Eli Roth was going to deliver that, because whether you like his previous films or not, that's something that pretty much across the board he's always delivered really well, is visceral gore, a lot of practical effects, just really leaning into a borderline exploitation in quite a few of his films, like the Hostel movies. This doesn't go quite that far. But for a slasher film, especially one that is going to lean into like the B-movie side of things, I want things to be gory. I want the kills to be extreme. I want there to be plentiful kills. And for the most part, he delivered all that in spades here. So if you're a slasher fan where the kills are the biggest piece of the puzzle that you have to be satisfied, you're going to be satisfied with what Eli Roth brings you in Thanksgiving. There's a nice variety in the kills. There's a number of them that really do kind of play into the Thanksgiving holiday in a really sick, twisted way. The vast majority of it is practical. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but the practical effects, the gore that we do get here that is practical, is impressive. Yet again, another example that, especially in slashers, Keep that shit practical. I also really liked the killer here of John Carver. That was a real life person that actually founded Plymouth, the town that this thing is set in, and it kind of goes back into the old school genesis, the origins of the Thanksgiving holiday. So it all fits, but I do like the look of the character. It's just an all black suit with that very traditional pilgrim hat and then this kind of plastic John Carver face and his signature weapon's an axe. It's simple, but sometimes simple is good. We haven't gotten too many new horror icons in the past, shit, I'd even say 20 years. Like Ghostface was the last really significant one. Of course, you have Jigsaw. You have a few others that have been in there lately, but for the most part, most of our horror icons belong to the 80s. John Carver, I do think, has potential to be a new horror icon. And we'll see in the future if that comes to fruition. An element of this movie that I was not expecting, that I actually think they did really well, was implementing kind of the new age generation of technology into here. There's so many people out there, and so many times we've said that horror movies have really been hindered by modern technology because you're always asking, why don't they just call for help? Why don't they get on the internet? Why don't they use their cell phone? You know, back in the 80s and the 90s, it was easier to maintain that tension because there wasn't so much available to us all throughout the day. And I think this movie did a really cool and clever way of bringing in modern technology and utilizing it in a way to where it does not diminish the tension or diminish the reality of what is going on here. It doesn't make you suspend your disbelief that these people are still in this terrifying situation despite having supercomputers in their pockets. You have the killer himself that is basically sending out taunts through Instagram DMs. He's live streaming kills at one point and utilizing like GPS location to keep the cops off his scent. And there's even one of the kills in this movie where he disfigures somebody's face and their hands and they can't open their cell phone. So even though they should be able to just call for help in seconds, the face recognition doesn't work, the screen's bloodied up because their hands are mangled. Again, small detail, but something that was cool to bring in there to answer that question that always comes up in modern slashers. And finally, I appreciate the fact that this movie is a lot more fun, enjoyable, and rewatchable than most of Eli Roth's films. Now, what he does, I think that for the most part he does well, but rewatchable is not really a word that I use to describe most of his films. They tend to be experiences that hit you with whatever impact he's going for, and me personally, I don't really care to revisit. Green Inferno, I'll never watch that movie again. The first two Hostel films, while I appreciate how the first one impacted me and how much it just really disturbed me, not movies I ever really care to throw on that much. But this film, despite having significant issues with it that I'll get into, I liked it enough, I had enough fun with it, and it's an experience that I could rewatch enough that I could see myself throwing this on every November or every other November. It's got enough to it, it's got enough that I appreciate that I got most of what I wanted out of this, which was a fun time. And I will say this, and this is not a spoiler whatsoever for me to say this. There's enough here that I enjoy, there's enough that this movie does well, there's enough potential to grow from here that I think that this sets itself up really well to be a nice little franchise. 2 or 3 movies that Eli Roth can deliver for us over the next 5 or 6 years. And before anybody says it, me saying that is not confirming that the killer is still alive at the end of this movie. There are plenty of slasher franchises where we get the recurring look of the killer that is different people. Scream, perfect example of that. So I'm not saying one way or the other what happens at the end. All I'm saying is what Thanksgiving accomplishes, it sets itself up very well to have a Thanksgiving 2 second helpings or a Thanksgiving 3, and I want to see them. Moving on to the mixed aspects, and it's mostly just how different this final product film is compared to what the original teaser trailer is.
Thanksgiving.
And I think it's going to depend entirely on you on whether that's an issue at all. That original teaser trailer was a lot more into like the lo-fi, grainy look, a lot darker, both in tone and in visual. It's leaning a lot more into the exploitation side of things. And I don't know if it was studio pressure or if it was a creative choice on Eli Roth's part to make this much more of a traditional studio slasher and get away from a lot of that exploitation tone of that teaser. But part of me wanted more of that. You know, I really hope when we get the Blu-ray or any kind of physical release or digital release for this, that there's going to be an option to kind of put that film grain back into it and a little bit more of that old school Grindhouse look, because I really wanted that here. I was a little disappointed when the trailer showed that it's not going to be present at all. And to a certain extent, I actually liked how much meaner and much more visceral the kills seemed to be in that teaser versus the much more fun tone and much more self-aware, goofy tone that we get in the actual final film. Now, I appreciate it. I have fun with it. I like this version of it, but I can't help but think that I would have appreciated it a bit more if we got a little more of that tone from the teaser trailer. But on the other side of that, which is why it's in the mixed, I think if he leaned full bore into what the tone of that original teaser was, this would be another film that I would probably say is not the most rewatchable film in the world because it's so visceral and mean-spirited. So, kind of have to take the good with the bad in that. There's things that I wanted from that I've been wanting to see for 16 years now, and at the same time, I like the fact that this is a little bit more accessible, a movie that I would be comfortable watching more often than what the full version of that probably would be. And moving on to the negatives, and predominantly most of my issues with this film has to do with the writing. And I was actually surprised to find out when I got home that Eli Roth did not write this movie. He helped with the story, but the script writing was handed over to Jeff Rendell. And the reason that I was surprised is because all of my issues in regards to the writing of this movie is very reminiscent of the same issues that I've had with pretty much all of Eli Roth's films. So I found it a bit surprising as well as disappointing that he handed off that duty to somebody else and we still have the same issues here, where you have very unlikable characters, you have poorly written dialogue, and a bit of a missed opportunity in my mind for a bit of social commentary that this movie only barely teases and dips its toes into when there was so many opportunities just set up like dominoes throughout the movie to carry through with that, and they never really did. So in regards to the characters, I think a lot of the older cast is pretty good. I think that Patrick Dempsey is good. I think that Gina Gershon, for the little bit that she's here, is good. Rick Hoffman is enjoyable, despite the fact that he's pretty much playing the same character that he always plays. Everybody who is the younger cast, the teenage characters, the characters that we're following through most of the movie as our protagonists, I didn't like any of them. The acting quality of all of them ranges from passable, decent enough, to pretty terrible, and the characters themselves range from background noise, couldn't tell you any details about them character, to absolutely unlikable. And the issue that that creates in a movie like this is that if there's no characters that you really latch into, that you like, or that you root for, or that you're invested in, not only do you not care when they're being chased or they're being killed, you don't invest yourself in that side of things, but the scenes that are not focused on a character being chased or killed are a bit of a chore to get through. And there's a lot of this movie that is not just focused on kill scenes. And so anytime they're sitting around in a diner talking, anytime they're trying to talk about the little whodunit aspect and throwing out some answers and some questions, I just didn't care. I didn't like any of them. Even the eventual final girl that we get here, I couldn't tell you her first name. I couldn't tell you anything about her other than the fact that she is a female that survives to the end of the movie. And so it's just a really big letdown for me when you have a movie that actually is pretty damn successful at tapping into the energy of those old school 70s and 80s slashers, and even tapping into the energy of the original Scream to a certain degree. But the thing they dropped the ball on is the characters, which for me is just a gigantic chunk of enjoyment that's pulled out of this movie. And it doesn't help that the dialogue that they are given is not very good. I mean, for example, there's a character, they call him Scuba throughout the entire movie, and they only call him that to set up a scene where an adult asks him, "So why do they call you Scuba?" And his response is, "Because my last name is Diving." The fuck?
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
They also set this movie in Massachusetts, and so you have a very thick Boston East Coast accent with some of the characters, but they really only chose to give that to the loudest, most obnoxious, douchey characters, and those characters absolutely grated on my nerves the entire time that they were on screen. It's like they took the most stereotypical East Coast douchebag personality and they just ramped it up to 11. And sometimes characters like that are fun to have in slashers because they kind of make you root for whenever they eventually are going to get killed, and you hope they're going to get the most visceral, painful kill in the entire movie. And some of that is a success here, but there's also other characters that they don't have that success. You just can't stand being around them, and you're just like, God, just don't kill them, just get out of the movie. Exit stage left, bitch. While I absolutely praise the kills and the amount of practical gore that we get here, there is some CGI gore in here that was actually kind of surprising, because I don't think I've seen Eli Roth use CGI gore before now. Correct me if I'm wrong. But the very first premiere kill that we get in this movie is entirely CG, and it looked horrible. So I don't know if it's because the practical effects were so prevalent in this movie and looked so good that by comparison the CGI looked worse, or if it just genuinely was not rendered all that well. But the bit of CGI gore that we get here was a massive disappointment. The fact that it was used and the fact that it was used so poorly. And my final issue with the movie, I'm not gonna get into spoiler details whatsoever here, but I will, after the rating of the movie, elaborate on what I'm talking about in a more spoilery fashion so that you can get a bit of a more clear idea of what I'm getting at. But as of right now, no spoilers here. It's gonna be a little more vague. I felt like there was a missed opportunity here to have some really interesting and clever commentary, not only on the holiday of Thanksgiving, but Black Friday, which is what the inciting incident of this movie is. And tied along with that, the eventual reveal of the identity as well as the motive of the killer, I felt was incredibly weak and disappointing. On one side of things, I felt the identity of the killer was kind of obvious throughout most of the film, to the point where it felt like this has to be a red herring, because it just feels like this is so on the nose. And unfortunately, it wasn't for me. Also, the motive of the killer could have very easily have tied in to what I was just talking about, the commentary on the holiday itself and Black Friday, and it didn't. It just felt like something that was thrown in last minute to give a killer a motivation to kill people. And that kind of puzzled me a bit, because it felt like this movie very clearly set up so many avenues to go in a more commentary guided direction. And the fact that they just kind of discarded all of that felt odd. Like, you have the inciting incident of this movie, where there's a Black Friday sale at the big supermarket in town, and it's like the most stereotypical hysteria version of Black Friday, to where the doors open and people just mob their way in, and they're trampling each other. People are getting their necks broke and they're getting arms broke, and shopping carts are crashing in people's skulls. And so there's some deaths that happen on this Black Friday sale, and that is what is the inciting incident of this killer, John Carver, coming back a year later, is to punish everybody that kind of incited that hysteria a year prior. And that's a really interesting setup for a movie like this that leans into the holiday, and they didn't really follow through with it. So can't really get into more details with that without getting too specific, but that was a big missed opportunity to me that just felt odd, like it was dominoes that were all laid there. All you had to do was knock them over, and they chose not to. So all in all, guys, I did enjoy this one. I did have a good time with it. I could see myself rewatching it very easily. I just wish the characters and the dialogue that was being delivered by those characters was a bit better. If it was, I would have easily told you this was Eli Roth's best film, and would have easily told you this is pretty much an instant holiday classic, which we need in November. But that fell quite a bit short for me, and it's probably going to bother me more than some more casual slasher fans that just are focused on the gore and the kills. All right, so now diving into a little bit more specific detail with my last negative that I was talking about. To me, throughout the movie, I thought it was very obvious that Patrick Dempsey was going to be the killer, because he was the one that was like the most in the middle, to where he wasn't such a abrasive character, red herring, like the new boyfriend was, where so obviously every time he comes around there's like this weird nefarious tone with him, to where I'm like, there's no way he's the fucking killer. And Patrick Dempsey was involved with like every single scene. So to me, him being the killer was pretty obvious. But about halfway through the movie, I started to really hope that that was just being set up to divert all of our attention to him and away from Rick Hoffman. So Rick Hoffman being kind of the guy who is the owner of the store that all these deaths happened at, and he's yet again trying to open the store and have a sale again. He's getting all these protests. I thought it would have been really interesting to have him be revealed as John Carver, and he is taking his revenge out on all of these people that incited this riot, this incident at his store a year prior, because now they're fucking with his finances, they're fucking with his profits and his sales potential of his store.
Let's see.
When you start leaning into the Black Friday commentary about consumerism and about how obsessed we are with sales, and we will show the worst versions of ourselves to save a couple $100s on something that we don't even fucking need, that's the inciting incident of the movie. To have that come back around and be the killer's motivation, be the exact same thing, to where now he is eviscerating these people because of monetary greed, I thought that would have been really cool. And to me, the movie set all of that up. But as soon as it showed him at the kitchen table and they're carving his wife and he's vomiting, I was like, oh, okay, well, it's not him. I thought maybe potential it was him and Dempsey, something. I figured he would be involved somehow, hopefully, and that would be his motivation of the killer, but it wasn't. But from that dinner scene forward, I was like, okay, well, it's most likely not him now. It's probably going to be Patrick Dempsey. We'll see what his motivation is. Maybe there's something still really cool there. What's his motivation? Oh, I was fucking Gina Gershon and you killed her. Come on, like that was thrown in so last minute. That was thrown in as just such a shoehorn detail that I felt nothing in that. Even when they showed the little sonogram of his baby, I was like, okay, like I get it. That would motivate me to kill somebody too, but that's just so weak. And just the fact that they went with something so vanilla, when to me something much more interesting that still leans into the B-movie tone was right there. That was a disappointment for me. And I try my best not to judge movies based off of what I would have done and just judge what is given to me. And what is given to me was just a very weak motivation. And even the very last shot of the movie, and I didn't want to say this at all because I find it to be bordering on spoilers, where the lead girl is in bed and she has the dream that Patrick Dempsey grabs her in the closet and then she opens her eyes and then the credits, that was a really shitty ending. That was a really last like 2 to 3 minutes there. It was edited very awkwardly. So I don't know. There's potential here. I would like to see them do a Thanksgiving 2, like I said, and I guess Patrick Dempsey would be the returning killer since, quite obviously, he's still alive. They pretty much all but tell that to you in the movie. I just felt there was so much more opportunity to do something a little better with that, and they didn't. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for all of my 2023 new release reviews. I'm also going to put my Hostel review series for you to check out. Like, share, and hit that subscribe button because I will be ranking all of Eli Roth's films in a couple of days. And I believe on Thanksgiving Day, I'm going to release a video talking about my top 10 holiday horror films. So if you're interested in that, stick around. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.